Colorado Territory, 1874. The last light of day painted Timber Creek in hues of amber and gold, casting long shadows across the single dusty street that constituted the heart of this frontier settlement. Zachary Sutton tugged at his leather gloves, his 25-year-old frame lean and hardened by years in the saddle. The cattle drive had ended 2 days ago, leaving him with a pocket full of wages and the familiar emptiness that always followed the trail's end. "You heading out tomorrow?" asked Frank, the livery owner, as Zach brushed down his chestnut gelding. "First light," Zach replied, his voice quiet but carrying the hard edge of a man who'd learned to guard his words as carefully as his back. His face, handsome despite the thin white scar that traced his jawline, remained impassive. At 6 feet tall, with shoulders broadened by ranch work and sunlight and brown hair that curled slightly at his collar, he drew appreciative glances from the local women, but Zach kept his distance. Frank shook his head. "Town's quiet now the drive's done, might do you good to stay a while." "Nothing for me here," Zach said flatly. The rhythm of his life was as predictable as the seasons: drive cattle north in spring, take odd jobs through summer, head south for winter work. Relationships were dangerous entanglements that only led to pain. His parents' hardscrabble existence had taught him that harsh lesson early: love was a luxury the frontier couldn't afford. Better to ride alone than to watch someone you care about wither under the unforgiving demands of Western life. As twilight deepened, Zach's boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he made his way toward the Frontier Hotel. His gaze caught on a woman emerging from the general store, her arms filled with parcels. She wore a simple blue dress that complemented her slender frame, her honey blonde hair pinned neatly beneath a modest bonnet. Something about her careful movements, the determined set of her shoulders, made him pause. She stumbled slightly, one package slipping from her grasp. Zach moved forward without thinking, catching the brown paper parcel before it hit the dirt. "Thank you, sir." Her voice carried the refined edge of Eastern education, her eyes, a striking shade of green, meeting his briefly before looking away. "Ma'am." He handed the package back, noting the delicate fingers that reached for it, unmarked by the calluses that frontier life quickly bestowed. "Tessa Addington," she offered with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm afraid I'm still adjusting to town life." Zach nodded, studying her. She couldn't be more than 22, yet there was a weariness to her that spoke of burdens heavier than her parcels. "Zachary Sutton passing through." "As am I," she said, something flashing across her expression, relief perhaps. "Good day to you, Mr. Sutton." He tipped his hat, watching as she continued down the boardwalk toward the hotel. There was a story there. He'd been on the frontier long enough to recognize when someone was running from something, but it wasn't his concern. By tomorrow, they'd both be gone from Timber Creek, ships passing in the vast ocean of the Western Territories. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Zach rose before sunrise, packing his few possessions with practiced efficiency. The hotel was quiet as he made his way downstairs, planning to grab coffee at the cafe before hitting the trail. The hotel's small sitting room was empty except for the clerk behind the desk, who nodded sleepily. As Zach passed through, his boot knocked something partially hidden beneath a chair, a folded piece of paper that had been crumpled and then smoothed out again. He would have ignored it, but the edge was singed, as if someone had tried to burn it and then changed their mind. Curiosity, a dangerous trait for a man who minded his own business, made him pick it up. The letter was addressed to Miss Tessa Addington, the handwriting elegant and precise. His eyes caught a few phrases. "Deepest regrets, your father's passing, the entire estate, rightfully yours." Zach refolded the paper, intending to leave it at the desk, when he heard quick footsteps on the stairs. Tessa appeared, dressed in a practical traveling outfit of brown skirt and cream-colored blouse, a small valise in her hand. Her face went pale when she saw the letter in his grasp. "That's mine," she said, her voice tight. "Found it on the floor." He held it out, watching her carefully. "Appears important." Her fingers trembled slightly as she took it, the paper disappearing into her pocket. "It's nothing, just correspondence I no longer need." Zach noted the stagecoach ticket clutched in her other hand, heading south. "Denver," she said, then hesitated. "Actually, that's merely the first stop." Their conversation might have ended there, two strangers exchanging brief words before continuing on separate journeys. But fate, which Zach had long ago decided had a cruel sense of humor, had other plans. The hotel door burst open and the sheriff strode in, his weathered face grave. "Stage ain't coming," he announced. "Bridge washed out 20 miles south after that storm 2 days back. Be at least a week before it's passable again." Tessa's face drained of color. A week, but I must leave today. Surely there's another way. The sheriff shook his head. Unless you've got your own horse and don't mind riding through Comanche territory, you're stuck here, miss. Zach watched as something close to panic flashed across Tessa's features. She clutched her valise tighter, her knuckles whitening. Whatever or whoever she was running from, the delay clearly terrified her. I'll pay, she said suddenly, turning to Zach. If you're heading south, I'll pay you to take me to the next town with railroad service. Zach's instinct was to refuse immediately. Traveling companions meant complications, and complications meant trouble. But something in her desperate expression stirred a feeling he thought he'd buried years ago: empathy. It's dangerous country, he said, measuring his words, not a journey for someone unprepared. I'm stronger than I look, she countered, lifting her chin. And I can pay well. The singed letter in her pocket and the fear in her eyes told him she was running from something significant. His own plans were flexible. He was heading to a ranch near Santa Fe for winter work, but he wasn't expected for weeks. Against his better judgment, he found himself nodding. I'll take you as far as Cimarron. They've got rail service east from there. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. When can we leave? Hours time, Zach replied, already questioning his decision. Pack light, only what you can carry on horseback. As she hurried back upstairs, Zach caught the hotel clerk watching him with raised eyebrows. Riding escort now, Sutton, that's not like you. Zach didn't answer. It wasn't like him at all, which was precisely what troubled him as he headed to the livery to prepare for the journey. He'd spent years keeping to himself, avoiding entanglements, following the cowboy's creed of riding alone. Yet here he was, agreeing to escort an Eastern woman across dangerous territory for reasons he couldn't fully explain even to himself. Perhaps it was the haunted look in her eyes that matched something in his own soul, the expression of someone running from ghosts that couldn't be outrun. Or maybe it was simply that helping her gave purpose to his aimless wandering. Either way, as he saddled his gelding and arranged to purchase a gentle mare for Tessa, he knew he was breaking his own cardinal rule: never get involved. The journey began in silence. Tessa rode better than Zach had expected, sitting straight in the saddle of the dun mare he'd chosen for her. She wore a divided riding skirt that allowed her to ride properly, not side saddle, and had traded her bonnet for a wide-brimmed hat that shaded her face from the relentless sun. They followed the old military road south, keeping a steady pace that would cover ground without exhausting the horses. By midday, they'd left Timber Creek far behind, the vast expanse of Colorado territory spreading around them, rolling hills to the east, the distant peaks of mountains to the west. When they stopped to rest the horses by a small creek, Zach built a quick fire to boil coffee. You ride well for an Easterner, he commented, breaking the hours of silence. Tessa looked up from where she was refilling their canteens. My father insisted I learn. He said a lady should be accomplished in all things, including horsemanship. A shadow crossed her face at the mention of her father. The letter, Zach said carefully, it mentioned your father's passing. I'm sorry. Her expression closed immediately. I'd rather not discuss it. Zach nodded, respecting her privacy even as curiosity gnawed at him. The letter had mentioned an estate. Perhaps she was an heiress fleeing unwanted suitors or greedy relatives. It would explain her desperate need to leave town. Where are you from originally? He asked instead, handing her a tin cup of coffee. Philadelphia, she replied after a moment, though I've been living in Denver this past year. Teaching at a girls' school. Long way from Philadelphia. That was the point. Her green eyes met his briefly before looking away. What about you? Have you always been a cowboy? Zach poked at the small fire with a stick. Since I was 16. Parents had a small homestead near Pueblo. Wasn't enough to support us all, so I hired on with a cattle outfit. Been riding the trails ever since. And your family? Gone now. Fever took my mother. Father tried to keep the place going, but he shrugged. Bank took it in the end. He headed to California to try his luck in the goldfields. Never heard from him again. Tessa's face softened with sympathy. I'm sorry. It seems we're both alone in the world. Most folks out here are, Zach replied, standing to kick dirt over the fire. That's why it's best to rely on yourself, only person you can count on. Is that truly what you believe? She asked quietly. He met her gaze. It's what experience has taught me. They rode until dusk, making camp in a sheltered draw near a small stream. Zach efficiently set up their simple camp, building a fire and preparing a meal of bacon, beans, and coffee. Tessa helped without complaint, gathering wood and laying out bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. As night settled around them and stars emerged in the vast sky overhead, the crackling fire created a small island of warmth in the wilderness. Tessa sat with her arms wrapped around her knees, her face thoughtful in the firelight. "May I ask you something, Mr. Sutton?" "Zach," he corrected, "and yes. Why did you agree to help me? You don't seem the type to change your plans for a stranger." He considered the question, staring into the flames. "Honest answer, I'm not entirely sure myself." He looked up at her. "Maybe I recognized something familiar." "What's that?" "The look of someone running from something that can't be outrun." Her breath caught, and for a moment he thought she might deny it. Instead, she nodded slowly. "Perceptive of you." "Don't need to know what it is," he added quickly. "Not my business." "Thank you for that," she hesitated, "though perhaps it would help to tell someone. I've carried it alone for so long." Zach remained silent, giving her space to continue or withdraw as she chose. "The letter you found," she began, her voice low, "it was from my father's lawyer. My father died 6 months ago, leaving his entire estate to me. It's considerable. He owned shipping interests in Philadelphia." "Wouldn't think inheritance would be something to run from," Zach observed carefully. Tessa's lips curved in a bitter smile. "It is when it comes with conditions. My father arranged for me to marry his business partner's son, a man twice my age with a reputation for cruelty hidden behind social polish. The will stipulates that I must marry him to inherit. That's why you came west." She nodded. "I took what money I had and fled to Denver, found work as a teacher. I thought I'd escaped, built a new life. Then yesterday this arrived." She touched her pocket where the letter rested. "They've found me. The lawyer writes that Mr. Harrington, my intended, will arrive in Timber Creek within days to escort me home to fulfill my father's wishes. I tried to burn the letter last night, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy it completely. It's all I have left of my former life." "And now you're running again." "Yes," her voice caught, "though I'm beginning to wonder if I'll ever stop running." The firelight caught the glint of unshed tears in her eyes, and Zach felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he thought he'd buried years ago. "Get some rest," he said gently. "We've got hard riding ahead tomorrow." As Tessa settled into her bedroll, Zach took first watch, his rifle across his knees. The night was quiet except for the occasional call of a coyote and the soft breathing of the woman who had, against all his instincts, begun to matter to him. Dawn broke with a distant rumble that Zach recognized immediately. Not thunder, but hoofbeats, multiple horses approaching fast. He was on his feet instantly, kicking dirt over the remnants of their fire. "Tessa. Wake up," he kept his voice low but urgent. "Riders coming." She sat up immediately, sleep falling away at the tension in his voice. "Who?" "Don't know." He handed her the reins to her mare. "But we're not waiting to find out. Could be Comanche, could be men looking for you." They mounted quickly, Zach leading them into a grove of cottonwoods that followed the stream. The water would mask their tracks if they rode in it for a while. They pushed the horses to a trot, moving deeper into the trees as the sound of pursuit grew louder. "They're following us," Tessa said, fear evident in her voice. "Yes," Zach's hand rested on his colt. "When we clear these trees, we're going to make a run for that ridge. Once we're over it, they'll lose sight of us temporarily. That's our chance to find better cover." They broke from the trees, spurring their horses across the open grassland toward the ridge. Behind them, shouts confirmed they'd been spotted. Zach glanced back, 4 riders, too distant to identify, but definitely white men, not Comanche. His jaw tightened. Tessa's fears had been well-founded. They crested the ridge and immediately turned west, following a dry creek bed that offered some concealment. The horses were blowing hard, and Zach knew they couldn't maintain this pace much longer. "There's an old line shack about 3 miles ahead," he said. "Used to be part of the Circle M spread before they sold out. We might be able to make a stand there if we can't lose them." Tessa nodded, her face pale but determined. "I won't go back," she said fiercely. "I'd rather die out here than live as that man's possession." The intensity of her words struck Zach hard. He'd been drifting for years, caring for nothing and no one, convinced that connections only brought pain. Yet in less than 2 days, this woman's courage had awakened something in him he thought long dead, the desire to protect someone other than himself. They reached the abandoned line shack as the sun climbed toward noon. It was a simple one-room structure, built of rough-hewn logs with a sod roof, but its walls were solid, and more importantly, it had gun ports cut into the walls. small openings designed to allow defenders to fire without exposing themselves. Zach led the horses around back where a small lean-to offered some protection. They unsaddled quickly, bringing their provisions and weapons inside. "Take this," Zach said, handing Tessa a Winchester carbine. "You know how to use it." She nodded, checking the action with practiced ease. "My father believed women should know how to defend themselves, even if society deemed it improper." A ghost of a smile touched Zach's lips. "Your father sounds like he had some good ideas, arranged marriage aside." "He did," she said softly. "He was trying to protect me in his way. He just didn't understand that some cages, no matter how gilded, are still cages." They positioned themselves at opposite sides of the shack, watching through the gun ports. The riders had slowed, aware that their quarry had gone to ground. They approached cautiously, spreading out to surround the shack. "Miss Addington," called a cultured voice, "this childish flight ends now. Your father's wishes will be respected." Tessa's knuckles whitened on the rifle. "Edgar Harrington," she whispered to Zach, "my unwanted fiancé." Zach studied the man through the narrow opening, expensively dressed despite the trail dust, with the soft hands and hard eyes of someone used to ordering others about rather than doing the work himself. The three men with him looked like hired guns, their expressions coldly professional. "No one needs to get hurt," Harrington continued. "The cowboy can ride away unharmed. This is a family matter." "She's not going with you," Zach called back. "The lady's made her choice." Harsh laughter drifted from one of the gunmen. "Lady's got no choice. Her daddy's will says she marries the boss or gets nothing. Law's on our side." "I'd rather have nothing than be bound to him," Tessa said, loud enough for them to hear. "Leave us be, Edgar, there's nothing for you here." "You've become uncivilized out here," Harrington replied, his voice hardening, "but I'm a patient man. I'll give you until sundown to reconsider. After that, I can't promise your protector's safety." The four men withdrew to a safe distance, making camp within sight of the shack. The message was clear, they could wait. Inside, Zach took stock of their situation. They had food and water for perhaps 2 days, ammunition enough for a fight but no clear way out. 4 against 2, with Harrington's men positioned to prevent escape. "I'm sorry," Tessa said quietly. "I've dragged you into my troubles." Zach shook his head. "My choice to help, don't regret it." Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them, a connection deeper than their brief acquaintance should allow. In Tessa, Zach saw strength wrapped in gentleness, determination tempered with compassion, qualities he'd forgotten existed in this harsh land. "What will we do?" she asked. "Wait for dark," he replied. "Then I'll try to circle around, maybe take 1 or 2 of them by surprise, even the odds a bit." She touched his arm. "That's too dangerous, they'll be watching." "Got any better ideas?" She was silent for a long moment. "Actually, yes, but you won't like it." As she outlined her plan, Zach's expression grew increasingly grim. She was right, he didn't like it, but he had to admit it might work. Night fell slowly, the sunset painting the western sky in fiery colors before darkness claimed the land. In the gathering shadows, Tessa changed into the only dress she'd brought, a simple blue frock suitable for traveling. She unbound her hair, letting it fall in honey-blonde waves past her shoulders. "Remember," Zach said, checking his Colt one last time, "the moment you hear the first shot, get down and stay down." She nodded, her face resolute. "Be careful, Zach." He hesitated, then reached out to touch her cheek briefly. "You too." The door creaked as Tessa stepped out into the moonlight, her hands raised to show she was unarmed. "Edgar," she called, "I wish to speak with you." Movement from the camp indicated surprise at her appearance. Harrington emerged from the shadows, approaching cautiously. "I'm pleased you've come to your senses," he said, stopping a few yards from her. "I have conditions," Tessa replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "First, Mr. Sutton rides away unharmed. He was simply helping a lady in distress, as any gentleman would." Harrington's laugh held no humor. "You're hardly in a position to make demands, my dear, but yes, the cowboy can go. My quarrel isn't with him." While they talked, Zach slipped out the back of the shack, using the distraction to circle wide around their position. The 3 gunmen had moved closer, watching the exchange between Tessa and Harrington but still alert for trouble. "Second," Tessa continued, "I want a proper courtship once we return east. 1 year before any wedding." Harrington stepped closer. 6 months, and you'll behave as a proper fiancé should." Tessa forced herself not to recoil as he reached for her hand. "Very well." 6 months." Zach had positioned himself behind a large boulder that gave him a clear shot at two of the gunmen. His heart pounded in his chest, not from exertion but from fear for Tessa. The plan had seemed reasonable in the safety of the shack. She would distract Harrington while Zach took out his men. But now, watching her stand alone and vulnerable in the moonlight, he questioned his judgment in agreeing to it. "There's one more thing," Tessa said, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. "I want to see the letter from my father's lawyer, the one that gives you the legal right to force this marriage." Harrington's face darkened. "That's not necessary. The document is in Denver with my attorney." "Then I'll need your word as a gentleman that you'll honor our agreement about the courtship period." As Harrington began to respond, one of his men suddenly stiffened. "Boss, something's not right. The cowboy should have shown himself by now if she's surrendering." That was all the warning Zach needed. He squeezed the trigger, his first shot taking the alert gunman in the shoulder. The man went down with a cry of pain as Zach fired again, forcing the second man to dive for cover. "Get down," he shouted to Tessa. She dropped immediately, rolling away from Harrington, who was reaching for his own weapon. The third gunman fired toward Zach's position, bullets chipping stone fragments from the boulder. Harrington grabbed for Tessa, but she was ready. The small derringer she'd kept hidden in her sleeve appeared in her hand, aimed steadily at his chest. "Back away, Edgar," she commanded. "I don't want to shoot you, but I will." His face contorted with rage. "You little fool, you'll have nothing without me. Your father's fortune, your position in society, all gone." "I'll have my freedom," she replied. "That's worth more than all your money." A shot rang out not from Tessa's derringer but from one of the gunmen. Zach felt white-hot pain tear through his left arm. He gritted his teeth, shifting position to return fire. His next shot found its mark and the second gunman fell. The remaining hired gun, seeing the odds turning, broke cover and ran for the horses. Harrington, realizing his support was gone, backed away from Tessa. "This isn't over," he snarled. "The law is on my side." "The law doesn't reach everywhere in the territories," she replied steadily. "Now go, before I decide your continued existence is too great a threat to my peace." Harrington's face showed shock at her transformation from the proper Eastern lady he'd expected to find. With a final venomous glance, he turned and hurried after his remaining man. Tessa waited until they had mounted and ridden away before running to Zach's side. "You're hurt," she gasped, seeing the blood soaking his sleeve. "Just grazed," he said, though the pain suggested otherwise. "We need to move, they'll be back with more men." She helped him to his feet, supporting him as they made their way back to the shack. Inside, she quickly lit a lamp and tore strips from her petticoat to bandage his wound. "It's more than a graze," she said, cleaning the injury with water from their canteen. "The bullet went through the muscle, but I don't think it hit bone." Zach watched her work, her hands gentle but efficient. "You're good at this." "I volunteered in an army hospital during the war," she explained. "Father thought it would be good character building for a sheltered girl." As she finished bandaging his arm, their faces were close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken failings. "Thank you," she said softly, "for risking your life for a stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore, Tessa." She held his gaze, something vulnerable and hopeful in her expression. "What happens now?" Before he could answer, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. They both tensed, Zach reaching for his rifle despite his injured arm, but the voice that called out wasn't Harrington's. "Hello, the cabin. This is Deputy Marshal Collins. Anyone alive in there?" Relief washed over Zach. He knew Collins, an honest lawman who rode circuit through this territory. "We're here, Collins." "Two of us." When they opened the door, they found the marshal with 3 deputies and, surprisingly, the hotel clerk from Timber Creek. "Found these fellows about 2 miles back," Collins explained, dismounting. "2 wounded, 1 helping them and 1 hightailing it north. Want to tell me what happened?" As they explained the situation, the hotel clerk stepped forward. "When Mr. Harrington arrived in town asking after Miss Addington, something didn't sit right with me. He was too eager, too demanding. I rode to Fort Lyon to fetch the marshal." Collins nodded. Good thing he did. Harrington's got a reputation back east, 2 previous fiancés who died under questionable circumstances before the weddings. Nothing proven, but enough suspicion that he moved west looking for new opportunities. Tessa paled. "My father couldn't have known." "Probably not," Collins agreed, "but it explains his determination to claim you and your inheritance." "The will," Tessa said suddenly. It stipulates marriage, but it doesn't specify to whom. It merely names Edgar as my father's choice. She looked at Zach, a new light in her eyes. If I were already married to someone else. Zach's heart skipped a beat as he understood her implication. Tessa, you hardly know me. I know enough, she said quietly. I know you're a good man who risked his life for a woman you just met. I know you respect my choices and my freedom. She took a deep breath. And I know that in 2 days, I've felt more for you than I ever thought possible. Collins cleared his throat. As it happens, I'm authorized to perform marriages in the territory. Though I'd suggest you two might want to discuss this privately first. The deputies tactfully withdrew, leaving Zach and Tessa alone in the shack. You don't have to do this, Zach said, watching her face carefully. Harrington's on the run now. You could go anywhere, start fresh. I could, she agreed, but I'm tired of running and perhaps, she hesitated, perhaps what I've been running toward, not just away from, is the chance to choose my own path, my own partner. Zach took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I've spent years believing that caring for someone was a weakness out here. That the only way to survive was to depend on no one. He shook his head slowly. But these past 2 days have shown me I was wrong. Strength isn't in isolation, it's in finding someone worth fighting alongside. He dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. I can't offer you Philadelphia society or fancy dinner parties, but I can offer you honesty, respect, and a partnership where your voice is equal to mine. I'll build you a home wherever you want to put down roots, and I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust. Tears glistened in Tessa's eyes, but her smile was radiant. That's worth more than all the inheritance in the world. When Marshal Collins returned, he found them standing together, hands clasped, faces alight with the wonder of finding love in the most unexpected place. The marriage took place the next morning, beside a small stream where wildflowers bloomed despite the approaching autumn. Tessa wore her blue dress with wildflowers in her hair, and Zach had cleaned up as best he could, his arm in a sling but his face shaven and his eyes clear with purpose. The deputies served as witnesses, and the hotel clerk, who turned out to be a former seminary student before seeking his fortune out west, offered a blessing after the marshal's official words were spoken. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Collins declared, closing his worn Bible. May your union be stronger than the forces that brought you together, and may you find peace in each other when the world offers none. As Zach gently kissed his bride, the morning sun broke through the clouds, bathing them in golden light that seemed to promise a future brighter than either had dared to hope for. 2 weeks later, Zach and Tessa stood on the porch of a small ranch house 30 miles south of Cimarron. The property had been for sale, 160 acres with water rights, a sturdy house, and a barn that needed only minor repairs. The owner, an aging widower heading back east to live with his daughter, had accepted Tessa's offer immediately. Are you sure? Zach asked, his arm around her waist as they looked out over what was now their land. This is a far cry from Philadelphia society. Tessa leaned against him, contentment in every line of her body. I was never meant for that life. My father didn't understand that his little girl had dreams beyond ballrooms and social calls. She looked up at her husband, her green eyes filled with love. This is where I belong, with you, building something that's ours. The singed letter that had brought them together now rested in a small wooden box with their marriage certificate. Tessa had written to her father's lawyer, enclosing proof of her marriage and claiming her inheritance not out of greed, but because she and Zach had plans for that money. A school for the children of ranchers and farmers who lived too far from town, medical supplies for the Navajo reservation 20 miles west, seeds and livestock to help neighboring homesteaders through hard times. As the sun set over their new home, painting the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold, Zach pulled Tessa close. I spent years believing that the frontier was no place for love, he said softly. That caring for someone would only lead to pain. And now, she asked, though she already knew the answer in his touch, in the home they were creating together. Now I know that love is the only thing that makes the frontier bearable, he replied, kissing her gently. You gave me back my heart, Tessa Sutton. She smiled against his lips. And you gave me my freedom, Zachary Sutton. It seems we're even. As darkness fell, they remained on the porch, planning their future under the vast canopy of stars that had witnessed their unlikely beginning. A cowboy who believed love was a luxury he couldn't afford, and a woman fleeing a cage gilded with wealth and privilege. Two souls who found in each other not just escape, but home. The letter she had tried to burn had led not to her captivity, but to her freedom. And the cowboy who found it had discovered that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from riding alone, but from having someone at your side who chooses every day to ride the trail of life with you.